He built houses for everyone else's family for 30 years. Then his own children left. There is a particular kind of quiet that settles into a house once it has finally been finished. Not the busy quiet of a home lived in, but the other kind, the kind that arrives when there is nothing left to build. This is the story of a carpenter who understood every kind of house except the one he was living in himself, and who had to learn, late in life, how to build something just for him. In a market town known for its skilled hands, there was a carpenter whose work was requested up and down the valley. Families came to him when they were expecting a child and needed a larger home, when a daughter was to be married and needed a dowry chest, when a roof had finally given out after too many winters. He built additions on houses that had grown too small, cradles for infants not yet born, sturdy tables meant to outlast the families that gathered around them. Every commission he took was, in some way, an act of care for someone else's household, someone else's future. He was good at this work in a way that went beyond simple skill. He seemed to understand, without being told, what a family actually needed from a room. A young couple might ask for a modest addition, and he would quietly build in a windowsill wide enough for a mother to sit and nurse a child in good light. An aging widow might ask for a smaller table now that her house had emptied, and he would build one with a single hidden drawer, a small private space of her own that she had never thought to ask for, but always used. He built for the life a family was about to live, not only the life they described to him. At home, he had a family of his own, and for many years his own house was as full and as loud as any he built for others. There were children underfoot, always growing out of their beds and their chairs faster than anyone could keep up with. And he built for them too, in the scraps of time left over after his paid commissions. A step stool so a small child could reach the wash basin. A low bench along the kitchen wall, exactly the right height for short legs to swing while waiting for supper. He built these things quickly, almost carelessly compared to his commissioned work, because there was always another version coming soon enough, another size needed, another small correction to make as the children grew. He told himself in those years that there would be time later to build something for himself. A chair of his own design, perhaps, or a bench positioned just so, facing the window at the exact angle he preferred for the evening light. It was a small ambition, easily set aside whenever a commission came in, or whenever one of the children needed something adjusted, repaired, or replaced. There was always a more urgent house to build than his own comfort. The years did what years do. The children who had once needed step stools and low benches grew into people who no longer needed anything built for their height. And then, in the way that always seems sudden, even when it has been coming for a long time, they began to leave. One went to apprentice with a metalworker 2 towns over. Another married into a family with land of its own, in a valley he rarely had reason to visit. A third simply wanted to see more of the world than the market town could offer, and left with a traveling merchant's caravan one autumn morning, promising to write, which she mostly did. The carpenter kept working through all of this because there was always work, and work was a familiar and reliable thing to keep his hands busy with. He built additions and cradles and tables for other families exactly as he always had, understanding their unspoken needs as precisely as ever. It was strange to him, in a way he did not examine too closely at first, that he could sense exactly what a stranger's household required, down to the width of a windowsill, while his own house sat behind him each evening, quieter every year, without him quite noticing what it might need. It was a commission for a modest cottage on the edge of town, nothing especially difficult, that finally made him notice. The family had asked for a simple bench along one wall, something for the children to sit on while their mother worked in the kitchen nearby. He built it exactly as they described, and paused, chisel in hand, examining the finished piece before delivering it. He realized he had built the same bench, in nearly the same proportions, for his own kitchen decades earlier, for children who no longer lived in that kitchen at all. He returned home that evening and stood for a long while in his own house, looking at it the way he might look at a stranger's home he had been asked to improve. The step stool by the wash basin, worn smooth by feet that had long since grown too large for it. The low bench along the kitchen wall, empty now most evenings, though he had never gotten around to removing it. Every piece of furniture in the house, he realized, had been built for a version of his family that no longer existed, sized and placed for children who were now grown and scattered across other towns, other households, building their own quiet mornings without him. Nowhere in the house, he noticed for the first time, was there a single thing built simply for himself. Not a chair angled for his own comfort in the evening. Not a shelf at the height that suited his own reach. every surface, every measurement had been made in service of someone else's needs, first his children's, and for 30 years before that, the needs of families he had never met more than a handful of times before finishing their commission and moving to the next. He did not resent this exactly. It had been, in its way, a good use of a life. But standing in his own quiet house, he understood that he had never once done for himself what he had done instinctively for every family whose door he'd built additions onto. He had never asked what his own house needed from him now, in this particular season of his life, the way he so easily understood what a young couple's house needed, or a widow's. He began, that winter, with something small. A single chair, built to no one's specification but his own, positioned exactly at the angle he had always meant to place one, facing the window where the evening light came in warmest just before dusk. It took him longer than any commission he could remember, not because the joinery was difficult, but because he had never had to guess at his own preferences before. He had spent so long reading the unspoken needs of other households that reading his own felt, at first, like an unfamiliar language. He did not stop working for others. Commissions still came, and he still built additions and tables and cradles with the same care he always had. But in the evenings, more and more, he found himself in that single chair by the window, in a house that was quieter than it used to be, but no longer felt entirely empty. He began building small things for that chair's corner of the house, a side table sized for exactly 1 cup, a shelf at exactly his own reach, and slowly, without any single dramatic decision, the house stopped being only a monument to the family that had grown and left, and became, in one modest corner at least, a home for the man who remained. His children wrote when they could, and visited when the distance and the seasons allowed it, and when they did come home, they would find him in that same chair by the window, and would often remark, without quite knowing why it struck them, that the house finally looked like somewhere their father actually lived, rather than somewhere he had only ever built for everyone else. He never spoke to them about what had changed. He only sat most evenings, in the one chair in the house built for no one's needs but his own, watching the light move across a room he had spent 30 years filling with everything except that.